broadcasting.
Awesome.
So I guess just to provide context, if anybody watches this, we had our scheduled hangout at 5 Pacific, but that was right when Slack was having an outage, and our whole thing was like, come into Slack to get the link, since we're doing this broadcast, so I need to start the broadcast before we get a link, sort of. And so I think a lot of people are not able to join because they don't have the link. So it's just 4 of us just kind of hanging out and talking about stuff, maybe Command.io related, maybe not. But
Okay.
You need to wait until I'm done.
The NFS stuff there was something else that I thought was really cool. Oh, I was doing SSH agent forwarding. Or I'm in the middle of implementing that for Command.io. And it turns out to be like pretty, I mean, on one hand, it's kind of straightforward. It's just kind of a lot of plumbing, you know? Do you guys, so it turns out, like I learned a lot figuring out, there's a lot of kind of undocumented stuff on how SSH agent forwarding actually works.
You should document it.
Well, yeah, I mean, it turns out it's, I think if I do this post kind of on what I was just gonna share, that it would kind of, because there's not a lot to it, it's just kind of like unclear. So when you look at, if you look up like how does it work, you know, so that you know how to use it, they have like little diagrams where it's like, here's your computer, here's like, you know, the other computer, and then you're gonna SSH to another computer. And it's basically, you know, on your computer, you have your agent running, and when you do not port forwarding, agent forwarding, it's basically using, see, this is what was unclear, like SSH has, the protocol itself has channels, it's multiplexing. And so it can also do port forwarding. So it was unclear like what was actually being set up behind the scenes to actually expose a port or a Unix socket on the other host that an SSH client there would connect to, as if it was connecting to a local SSH agent.
Right.
So it turns out it is like kind of a custom thing, like the name of the channel is custom, so it's not exactly the same. And then also, I thought it was going to be real easy because Go has, you know, they have an SSH package that is what all of our stuff is based on, and it has a sub package called agent that, you know, I glanced at it, it's like, oh, SSH agent implementation. I was like, okay, cool, we don't have to write anything, we just drop this in. And then I realized when we went into it, that only takes care of this first leg. It's an agent implementation, like the server that it connects to, and then the client. So if you're doing an SSH client that needed to access the agent keys, so it's a client and server here, but it doesn't actually do anything for the other part on the other end. So it was kind of useless, except it did, like looking at the implementation, show me how things are wired up.
Because the agent, someone told me, and it sounded plausible, agent communication happens over a file socket, right? And there's really not a lot of permission. I guess the password you type will allow access into that local socket, and it must have been you. So someone was saying basically agent forwarding makes that socket show up on the remote system, so that the SSH commands that you run on the remote system don't know any better. They don't know where that agent.
So the SSH server basically creates a Unix socket and sets a variable, because SSH clients use the variable to find out where that is.
Yes, yes.
And then it just proxies that, but proxies it through your SSH connection to the other end. And so it's more or less like SSH port forwarding, but it's just a little bit custom, and, you know, it creates this file on the other end. So that was part of it. The other part, though, that's complicated with Command.io specifically, so that was pretty straightforward. We put that in our SSH library, and so that's exposed. You can now do agent forwarding. The problem is, so in our case, you have your client, and you connect to the SSH server, and that's usually where your client is that accesses the socket. But in our case, the SSH server that you connect to is separate from the environment that you're in that you would run the SSH client, because it's actually running in a totally different cluster, a sandbox Docker environment.
Right.
So now we have to basically do somehow tunnel from here over here, and specifically into a container. And there's a bunch of different ways that you could do that.
Yeah.
And the way that I ultimately, and there's all kinds of, because you need, because now it's like, okay, so what do we set up a tunnel between here? What does that tunnel look like? What are you using? Is it on the host system of that Docker container? And then like a Unix socket that's mounted in, or all this stuff, and any of those options would require a lot of other extra orchestration and security, and we actually have it so that the Docker cluster can't make connections back out to the that's running stuff. So it wouldn't be able to like connect back or anything like that. And connecting in is troublesome because it's within Docker, so it's this network within a network. I ended up, the only connection between these two things so far is the Docker attach, which is already being used for your terminal session input and output. But luckily, and this is something I rarely use, but people use it a lot, Docker exec lets you attach another stream to another process running in that same container. So the simplest thing you can do would be after you start this connection, you open up another attach to that same container, and then use something like SOCAT to basically create a socket and tunnel it back.
Yeah.
And then, but the problem is that SOCAT, it's sort of like you can listen and connect. What would it connect to? So you have it like send stuff to standard out. But then the problem is, if you ever run more than one agent, you have to handle more than one connection on that same line. So now you have to multiplex on this attached line. So you can't use SOCAT because it's not going to have any built-in multiplexing. And also, I can't really use SOCAT or netcat or anything because the your container environment might be different. It might be running Alpine or Ubuntu. So to get SOCAT in there, you have to figure out how to do that, and you need to do it quite fast because it needs to happen as soon as possible. And so, I mean, one idea is to just include SOCAT already installed on everything that we support, but I kind of don't want to do that kind of hard coupling. And so we did an experiment for a different scenario where we actually create a really, really tiny Go program, which doesn't have any dependencies on libc or anything like that. So it can run on any Linux kernel. And so that's the only thing we have to worry about. And then it can be really tiny, and we basically just, when we connect, we pipe that in, and then we exec into it.
Okay.
So it's basically installing it and then running it through the same connection that actually it uses to then multiplex the connections. So anyway, and then it goes back and then back and connects. So it's just like kind of a crazy plumbing scenario, and then implementing all this kind of iteratively has just been kind of fun. A lot of steps, even though it's in theory straightforward. Like once you get your head wrapped around it.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's what's required in order to be able to SSH from a command IO command, without putting secrets or keys in there. So this will allow you to like actually chain to other command IO commands and SSH to other remote servers that you
Right.
might have your public key on.
Yeah. I was
So
thinking about mounting a file system that would just do the agent, but it sounds like, I don't know. I've never done a kernel file system, and it's not something that.
Oh yeah, I guess it's possible you could implement the agent.
And then you do like
That's
a
interesting.
Yeah, I mean, it just
So
go ahead.
This idea is just like, oh, we need to just like forward some ports, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if that command that's actually run is actually an SSH agent server, then we have a little bit more control. Like it simplifies a little bit. We don't have to worry about multiplexing because we can just have a custom protocol.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? To go from here to here, we only have to do port forwarding between the normal 2 points, and then do something more lightweight to just do the SSH commands between here, which would be an easier, simpler protocol. I mean, the multiplexing is easy, like there's libraries for it, but
yeah.
So I don't know, it could go either way.
Cool stuff. Well, I got to get going soon, but let's schedule again. Every Thursday is a good time for me. So.
Yeah, so Thursdays sound good. I wonder if we should experiment with the time, or just kind of say this is Slack's fault.
Let's call it Slack's fault this time, and then
see what happens next time.
See what happens next time. Yeah.
Okay.
Cool.
All right. Cool. Talk to you guys later.
Sounds good. Later.
Bye.